I'm just going to hang on for a minute or two. I know you're there in the background, people, but we'll give it a couple of minutes and then I'll get started. Okay, I'm just literally going to give it another 30 seconds and then we'll get going. Okay, well let's get started. Well, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning for our second bidding webinar, which is all part of the Hammersmith and Fulham Ready to Supply Business Support Programme. And as I think most of you know, it's all about helping you as local businesses get a better chance of winning those larger contracts with both the council and with private sector companies. I think you know the ground rules on these sort of webinars. I'm told you can't actually unmute yourselves or put yourself on camera, but if you can keep that off, that's absolutely great. Those of you who've heard my webinars before, you'll know that I'm somewhat old-fashioned and I like to write things down and I like to get you to commit to do something. So my opinion generally is if you write things down, then you're more likely to remember things and you're more likely to actually do something as a result to take your business forward. So do commit to doing something yourself, and as I say, make some notes for yourself. If you have questions, pop them in the chat, and I'll be monitoring that as we go through. And yeah, let's get started. I'm going to whiz through these initial slides in case you saw them before. It's just a reminder for people, if you don't know who I am. I'm the program manager, and I work for Branduin. We're the company delivering the program on behalf of the council. My background is banking, as you can see, 30 years with Lloyds, dealing with all sorts of businesses, right from startups through to larger corporates and international banks. And I also spent 4 years as the head of our government team, which involved a lot of bidding and tendering, both new bids and tenders and also renewals. So that's where a lot of my experience comes from, both with local authorities and central government departments. I'm an advisor with Branduin. I'm the program manager for this Hammersmith and Fulham Business Support Programme, and I've worked on a number of these bidding, tendering programs with other councils. I guess it's all about, as I say, helping you improve your expertise in bidding. And I'll talk about the one-to-ones. I think I've done the best part of 150 one-to-ones in the last couple of years. I've got a little bit of experience. And as you can see from the bottom, I also run my own small social care business, which is good for my heart and feels like I'm doing something valuable in terms of helping older people. That's enough about me. The bidding skills program, as it says all about giving yourself a competitive edge. The key word in that first section is these are interactive sessions. I'll be doing a fair bit of talking, but you'll also get a chance to do some work and some exercises on your own business, which I think will help you cement the learning that we'll get and work through in this session. There are 2 sessions. The first session was last week. If you didn't manage to attend, I'll give you a link for the recording. And obviously, all the things we talk about today are based around excellence in selling and best practice. When I say best practice, I mean things that I've come across, things that we've come across when we're talking to other businesses in terms of their bidding and tendering knowledge and experience. So that's a quick reminder of what we've started doing last week and what we will be doing. I'll cover that in a moment in a little refresher session. So basically, I won't go through all those bits and pieces now. but we'll cover all those things later in this session, or we will have done on the initial session. So do get involved, do put stuff in the chat, and you'll get much more out of the session. So as I said, all the previous webinars that we run as part of these programs are on our YouTube channel. That's the link there. We will be sharing these slides and the recording with you after the session. So if you've missed something, you can go back and have a look at it in your own time and catch up. And there's the specialist bidding webinars, and there are also the wider ones, which I'll talk about again in a few moments. So just a tiny bit about Brandywin and what and who we are. We're a group of leading business advisors in London and the South East. What we generally do is we work with local authorities, we work with growth hubs, we work with Chamber of Commerce's, managing and running these sort of strategic business support programs on their behalf. We're a bunch of advisors, specialist associates, and we have a number of also proprietary programs that we run, as you can see in the bottom right of the slide. Fit to Bid is all about bidding and tendering, and essentially we've done that with a number of councils in and around the London area. There's a few others there. We run a Women in Business program as well. We've run a peer networking program with Hertfordshire, and that's where businesses get together and share ideas. What we think makes us a little bit unique is that we're all business owners ourselves. We're all somewhat, I know this is politically incorrect, long in the tooth in terms of years. I've got 40 years of banking and business experience. I run my own businesses, and I also do these support programs. So we've got some practical knowledge. We've been through the sort of challenges you're going through, as well as knowing the technical stuff. So just a little reminder about the program. As I said, we'll show you how to engage with procurement departments. There's an online bid capability questionnaire. If you haven't seen that already, it just takes 5 minutes for you to complete, and it gives us an idea of your state of preparedness in terms of bidding and tendering experience. So if you haven't completed it, it's definitely worth 5 or 10 minutes of your time. We'll help you improve your bidding skills. Like I said a few moments ago, it's a sales process. It's not an administrative exercise. If you treat it like that, you're probably going to be on the wrong track. And we'll give you specific advice in terms of tendering on a one-to-one basis. So the program actually includes 2 fully funded 1-hour sessions with a specialist like myself, providing you're a business in Hammersmith and Fulham. So let's get ready and go. Little summary of the benefits of the program. It is a great program. It kicked off back in February. It runs till February next year. And there are a lot of benefits, including obviously the assessment of your bid writing skills at the moment, sharing knowledge, sharing skills, best practice we've come across, the one-to-one sessions that I just talked about, helping you submit what's called an expression of interest. And that's just a formal way of notifying typically public sector organisations, the council, that you have an interest in bidding for a piece of their business. We'll give you help with writing and submitting tenders. And as part of the program, we'll also look at your wider business model. You may have come across business model canvas term, where we look at your business on a broader perspective, including things like your value proposition. How do you add value? We don't just say goodbye to you in between these webinars and leave you on your own. There is engagement throughout the program. We are going to support you with regular and ongoing feedback. So make the most of it, because it really can change and help you in terms of winning those larger contracts. I'm just going to spend literally 2 minutes in terms of reminding people what we covered in the first session, or if you didn't, if you didn't attend it, then obviously just a bit of a recap, if you like. I started to introduce some concepts to you. We looked at things like why organisations go to tender, making an objective and fair comparison, achieving sustainably competitive pricing, and that's not the cheapest pricing, but competitive pricing. Things like getting value for money, getting return on investment, delivering efficiencies, preferably measurable ones, finding a partner, what they look for, finding a partner that fits culturally, finding a partner that takes responsibility for when things go wrong, communicating openly. Getting the basics right is something we touched upon, and that is actually a form-filling exercise to a point. And you'll have to fill in things like supply questionnaires, a form of tender. You might be asked for some financial information about your company, provide references. Yes, that's a form-filling exercise, but it's critically important, as I've said, that you do get that right and comply 100%. Otherwise, you won't even make that first cut in terms of them slimming down suppliers. We did a bit of work around understanding the questions fully. I started introducing a few golden rules, as I call them. We looked at organisational objectives, both now and in the future, and really how to make sure that you fully understand and answer the questions in a way that gives the evaluators the best possible chance to score you highly and maximise your score. And then I touched upon researching the client. I'll hammer on about this quite a bit in terms of the more you know about your clients in advance, the better you'll be in terms of putting together a strong bid. We looked at sources of information, we looked at things like supplier definitions, how you can stand out from your competition, building relationships. So like, as I said, if you want to, and you didn't see the first session, then it is recorded and you can look at that at your leisure. So we looked at, and will look at, the principal elements of a winning bid. And it combines, like I say, the right price, and that's the case of knowing your market, knowing your competition, and the golden rules, which we started to talk about last week, and I'll do some more of that today. And these include things like answering the question according to the evaluation criteria fully, showing that broader knowledge and understanding of the strategic objectives of those clients, demonstrating you've got a solution that works, it's credible, it's competent, you can deliver it. And then also talking about benefits, how it helps the client, not what your product or service does, but what value it adds. We'll do some work on that during this session. And then how you back up what you say. How do you make your story and your bid more believable? What evidence you can provide, how you can convince them. And then finally, how to write in a way that's accurate, clean, and precise. And what we'll be doing is we'll be focusing on those 4 areas in red in the session today, having done the first 2 in our earlier session last week. Okay, so first golden rule. If you were going to plan, if you were going to climb a mountain, you wouldn't think, I'm going to do that day after tomorrow, I'll get up there. You'd probably do a bit of research, wouldn't you? You'd start perhaps talking to people who've done it before. You might actually look at, what are your options? What are the best routes? What are the weather conditions? What challenges have people faced before? And basically, that's the approach you should apply to your tender bids as well. Because if you do that planning in advance, if you thoroughly research, if you make sure you look at all the options, look at what challenges other people have faced, you're going to be in a much stronger position to actually be able to submit a winning bid. And how can you explain and articulate that to your clients? So it's an analogy, of course, but apply those same principles to your bidding and tendering process. It's the way you approach things. It's demonstrating your planning and thought process. So, how do we explain and answer that overarching question about how you will deliver your solution? How are you going to deliver that solution to the client? And, use what's relevant. And how, as it says, equals who, what, when, where, and why. So in terms of how are you going to execute your solution? And can you substantiate that? Can you back it up? Can you show them that you've got that experience? So firstly, who's going to deliver it? Who's going to deliver the service or the product? Is it you? Do you have partners? Do you deal with subcontractors? Who's responsible for particular parts and roles within the process? And I'd also encourage you to personalize these things. Use names, it just makes it more real. Who has responsibility for certain parts of delivering your solution? And then what approach are you going to take? What steps have you considered as part of delivering your solution? What processes, what methodology? Have you got experience, for example, in your team or yourself of managing these sort of projects? Do you have people who are project management qualified? Have you got key deliverables? What sort of products or materials and equipment will you need to deliver your service? And what sort of service level agreements, SLAs, will you put in place? All these things demonstrate a thinking process which gives the client confidence that you can actually deliver on what you're saying. And every project, of course, will have various different milestones and deadlines and schedules. So how are you going to measure those? How are you going to test them? Are you going to have a simple spreadsheet? Are you going to have like a Gantt chart where you can project manage who's doing what by when and track it? What are the dates to deliver key things within the project? What are the key requirements within the delivery of your solution? I talked a bit about planning last week, and I can't emphasize that strongly enough. The more you plan, the better you'll be in terms of making time to submit a winning bid. And where are you going to deliver this solution? Is it at your location? Is it the client's location? Do you have facilities, off-site facilities where you deliver? Will you perhaps use a member of your team? Does the client have a geographic distribution, so you have to deliver in different areas? Could you map that out? Where are they based? All these things will help you to convince the client you've got a credible solution. And then finally, the why. Why have you chosen the approach you have? Why have you chosen that solution? What other options did you consider and discount? What are the purpose of specific things that need to be done? How's that going to help the client? How's that going to help deliver your solution? And as I said, how do you evidence what you're saying? How can you prove and back up and give them the confidence that you're not just saying these things, but actually you can deliver and you can do it yourself? And of course, link everything back to benefits. Don't talk about what your product is, talk about what it does for the client. So if you can articulate that in a way that's clear, and as it says, include what's relevant, use common sense, it'll help the client believe that you can actually deliver what it is you're talking about. That's all about your thought process and articulating it back to the client. So let's talk about USP, unique selling proposition, unique, whatever you call it. What makes you stand out and what makes you different from your competition? Now, I hear the word unique used too commonly. People say, oh, it's fairly unique, it's partially unique. Well, it can't be any of those things, because essentially, if you look at the definition and it says, of which there is only one, unmatched, unequal, having no like, equal or parallel, then it's either unique or it's not, right? But it's quite difficult to be totally unique. When I talk to a number of businesses and we talk about their USP, a number of them will say to me, we provide great customer service. Well, I'm sorry, guys and girls, that's actually not unique, because I don't think I've spoken to any business who says we provide poor customer service. I've got one client I deal with, and what he has, for example, is he's got more 5-star Google reviews than any of his competitors. Now, that is unique. That does differentiate him from his competitors. That does mean he can stand out and say, look at me, no one's got more 5-star Google reviews than me. So that's one way of demonstrating uniqueness. Another way is to basically overcome a lack of uniqueness by being a bit more innovative in terms of how you deal with a standard approach. It doesn't have to be something particularly complex, but it might be something as simple as, like when I was in the bank, we had a rule that you had to answer your phone within 3 rings. Or you might have something that says you always return your messages within the same day. So the point I'm making is even though there's a standard approach to doing things, if you can do it better, if you can do it in a way that's different to your competitors, then it's a way of demonstrating uniqueness. And that is a positive, what we would call a positive discriminator. So that there are different ways of trying to help you stand out from your competition. So what? What's the purpose of all that great stuff? Essentially, your proposition, your solution has to pass that so what test. What's it going to do for the client? How's it going to help them? How's it going to save cost, improve a process, save management time? Always talk about benefits. And we'll do a little exercise about that now, I think. So first chance for you to do a bit of work, because I've been doing a fair bit of talking, is have a think now about your own offer, your own service, your own product, and what benefits does it have? And how can you explain the value that adds to a client? I'm going to give you a minute or two to put something in the chat. So put anything in the chat in terms of how you think your offer benefits a client. And then we'll run through those, and I'll give you some examples from the research that I've obviously done. So I'll give you a minute for that. One way of doing it, for example, while you're thinking, is to explain what you do and link it to the benefit with the phrase, which means that. So you might say something like, we've worked on a similar contract in other local authorities, which means that we've learned and adapted our solution to make it even more cost effective for you. If you can show and demonstrate how you can improve, how you can increase productivity, reduce costs, save time, you're going to be on the way to a winning bid. So don't be shy. I can't see anything in the chat yet. As I say, you'll get more out of this if you put something in. So just put something in the chat in terms of what benefits you think your own offer and service provides. I'll give you 30 seconds more for that, and then we'll run through some of the benefits from my perspective. But don't be shy. As I say, it forces you to think a little bit more about what's really great about your offer, which you can demonstrate tangibly and hopefully measurably to your clients, to your prospective clients. Oh, great! We've got something in from Floss, so that's really helpful. So yeah, for example, I think Floss is a therapist of some sort, and she says basically their credentials are checked annually, which means their therapists are safe. 20 plus inside knowledge of therapy world. Yeah, 2-hour response time. Yeah, these things are great. They're all genuine benefits. They're all genuine, unique selling points. Yeah, that's all good. Yeah, opportunity for people to learn and students to learn new skills. Yeah, that's great. Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you for participating, because as I said, you'll get more out if you do put something in as well. Let's go through and just talk about some of the primary generic benefits, if you like. Things like saving management time, reducing or eliminating costs, reducing risk, improving staff morale, higher margins. Does your offer have some sort of positive environmental impact? Can it reduce waste, for example? Does it basically decrease staff turnover, improve loyalty? These are all generic benefits, but you need to find a way of articulating those in a way that relates to your own offer. As it says, try to add something more to the benefits. And as I say, a way of measuring and quantifying gives a perception of much greater value. It's much more powerful, and it shows that not only are you saying you can reduce costs, for example, you can tangibly demonstrate it and measure it in a way that the client can see. So that's much, much more powerful. So to recap, we've understood the requirements. We've read the questions properly. We've done some research. We started talking to the client. We've started to build our relationship, and we explained how we'll meet their needs. We started talking about benefits. How do we make our story more believable? How can you prove or evidence that what you're saying is backed up? And the key word is evidence. So that's the next golden rule, is basically people believe and buy what they actually believe. So if you can provide some evidence, then it's going to be much stronger in terms of your case and your argument, as it is in court when you have like the prosecution and the defense. submitting their cases as clearly and articulately, the most articulate way they can. And, the idea is that you have to believe one or the other. So if you can evidence what you're saying, you're going to be putting yourself in a much stronger position in terms of your bid. So everyone loves a good story, right? So think about this question. If you were asked, what would your clients say about you? Just think about that for a moment. And then the follow-up question is that, and almost more importantly, is what would you want them to say? What would you want them to say? So I give you the simplest example is I've got a friend of mine who's in the bank. He left banking. He went and changed complete career, and he's now a handyman. And essentially, he's one of those tradespeople that's unique in so much as he always returns calls. He always gets in touch. He always says and does what he says. So I was with a friend who I recommended him to recently, and she said, oh yeah, Dave was great. He turned up on time. He done the job in a really good way. So basically, think about what you want your clients to say about you, because it's much stronger if your clients say how good you are, rather than you saying how good you are in terms of the service or product that you provide. So next exercise for you to have a little think about, again, pop some stuff in the chat, and that is, how do you make what you say more believable? How are you going to back up all these strong words that you're saying about how good you are and how wonderful your service is and how it saves costs and reduces management time and increases productivity? So have a think about that for a moment. I'll give you again a minute to do that, and pop some stuff in the chat as to how can you back up what you're saying? What things can you do and use in your bid to strengthen your case? I'll give you a moment for that. Yeah, case studies, outcomes, yeah, outcome figures, yeah, that's good. Photos are good as well. Instagram's a powerful tool. Yeah, use case study examples in your bids, Trustpilot reviews, yeah, all good stuff. Absolutely true. The more evidence you can provide, the stronger your bid will be. Yeah, MailChimp questionnaires also good. Yeah. Just give 10 more seconds for anyone who hasn't popped anything in the chat and wants to, and then I'll share some examples of the sort of things that I see in terms of evidence and what you can use. Yeah, longest stone days. Yeah. There's some great stuff in there. Thanks for your participation. Okay, so let's look at some of the evidence and the different types of evidence, because there are various different types and certain evidence is stronger than others. So let's start with objective evidence. This is the most powerful because it's independent. So you may have accreditations. You might be, for example, ISO 9001 accredited. You might have a really strong audit. How about third-party surveys that have been done on you? You may be able to have a proof of trial, proof of concept, do demonstrations. People have talked about testimonials. Yeah, they're good. They're very strong. Backs up what you're saying. Strong references. Perhaps you've won some awards. Had some positive press articles written about you in the company. The Chambers of Commerce have various events. They have various awards for best new startup or most innovative company. All these things are independent and strong. You might actually invite prospective clients to your site to see what you do and how you do it. And if you really, really have belief in what you do, you might even offer some sort of financial guarantee. So you might say, well, if we don't deliver on the objectives we've agreed, you'll get a 5% discount. So objective third-party independent evidence is the strongest form of evidence. So if you can include that in your bid, that's really powerful. Then you have what's called, I suppose, company or business evidence. So you have things like case studies you might have put together. You might have some operating procedures which you've put in place, and policies that help demonstrate that you've got processes, systems, project methodologies. some of these services that you might be asked to deliver could be quite complex. So if you've got people or you've got experience of managing projects of these types and you've got established methodology that you can prove you've used successfully with other contracts, that all helps in terms of your evidence. Then you've got your own company evidence. This is the information that you've produced yourself. So it's not as strong. It's basically your trust me statement. So you might have some data, some results. You may have given your opinion on certain things in your sector. You may have carried out some customer surveys. You'll have your own marketing material. You may have a copy of policies that would help. I mean, those sort of things all help. CVs, biographies of people. Having pictures might sound cheesy, but actually, if you can put a picture of the sort of people who are helping to deliver the bid or the key process owners in your bid submission, it just makes it a little bit more real. It just make people realize you're human. And with policy, every local authority will want to see some form of social value policy. You may have heard the term community wealth building. It's a big thing in most councils and local authorities, certainly in terms of Hammersmith and Fulham. So make sure you've got some form of social value policy. It doesn't have to be pages and pages, but just something that demonstrates you've taken into account and you have some systems and some processes to add value to the local community. All these things will help. And then you've got sector evidence. So you may be operating in a sector where there are standard industry procedures. Yes, you can rely on them. Yes, it helps. There may be standard approaches to how you do things, but they're non-exclusive because your competitors can also rely on them. So I guess they're the weakest form of evidence of those 4 different categories that we've talked about there. And then finally, you've got operational or incumbent evidence. So that's where you've got the existing contract. You are running with the supplier at the moment, and the contract or the tender is coming up for renewal. And there's lots of really good information and data that you should have as a supplier of the existing contract. So you can demonstrate, how you implemented your solution. Hopefully over the course of the contract, and these contracts can be typically 2-3 years, you'll have some management information, some performance information, which basically, you've been able to report back to the customer. You'll have hopefully satisfaction data, both for the customer, the end user, and perhaps other stakeholders who benefit from what you provide. You've hopefully also built up some case studies, of how you've added value, what sort of innovative approach you've adopted, what's been the positive impact of your offer on the customer's own organization. We know things go wrong. That's how life is, that's how business is. So when you faced issues and challenges, how did you resolve them? How did you resolve those problems in a way that was satisfactory to the client, to the customer? Do you have some customer positive quotes from them, from their stakeholders? And what I would suggest is start building up this bank of evidence generally, whether it's case studies, Google reviews, testimonials, policies, during your working week, month. Don't wait. What I'm saying is don't wait till you want to submit a bid or a tender and then think, oh, wow, we haven't got any case studies, or we need a policy on social value. Start to do your planning in advance and you'll put yourself in a much stronger position. So when you then want to submit a bid, you've got all that collateral, you've got all that information, that backup, that evidence already there, just ready to take out and use to bolster your bid and make it stronger. So various different types of evidence, as you can see. And with evidence, there are a few simple rules. It should be relevant. So, for example, if you've worked for another local authority, I'm dealing with another business owner, and he's done some great work for Brent, and he wants to try and get involved with Hammersmith and Fulham. He helps underprivileged kids into employment. Then get some testimonies from those people, because basically local authorities talk to each other. So have relevant evidence, relevant to the bid, relevant to the client, to the market, to the service, particularly where you have provided similar services. And make sure it's as recent as possible. Whenever I'm having a one-to-one with a new business, I obviously go onto their social media, I check out their website, they've got one, I check out Google reviews. And if for example, there are no Google reviews, I immediately think that's a bit strange. Wonder why there's none. Then sometimes you see businesses where they've got a few Google reviews, but they might be a year or more out of date. That's also a question mark in my mind. But if I go to a website, and they don't have to have hundreds, but even if they've got a dozen, for example, but they're all current, recent reviews in the last sort of 3, 6, 12 months, and obviously they're positive, it's much more powerful. It creates a positive impression in terms of you, your business, your brand, and your reputation, and it all strengthens your case. So like I just said, spend that time developing your evidence as you go along, because the evaluators, that's the people who will actually be looking at your bid response and scoring it, they all look for evidence. So what can you include to strengthen your case? Things like case studies, and include all these things in your planning process, because the more you do in advance, first of all, the easier it will be when you start to get to a point where you want to actually submit a tender, and the fact you've got all that collateral will save you time as well. So start building that evidence well in advance. So let's move on to writing. That's the next area I want to talk about, because I've spoken to a number of businesses who struggle with the style of writing, the way, condensing it down. The first key golden rule there is less is more. And there is a skill in doing this. It's not easy to write accurately, clearly, concisely in a restricted way. Certainly with local authority bids, you'll often have a restricted word count. What I mean by that is the section will say you can only have 250 words in this section. You can only have 500 words in that section. So for example, when I was working in banking, I had to write these briefs for senior executives when they met. So when the chief executive of Lloyds met the chief executive of Bank of America, one of my roles was to condense the best part of 20 files, how big, onto one page of A4. Let me tell you, that's not easy. So the point there is less is more. So the first thing to think about is the evaluators, like I say, the people who are going to be evaluating your bid response, they're human beings. Often it's not their day job, they're doing it in addition. So you need to keep your information as relevant as possible, because they won't have the time to dig through lots and lots of information to find what they need. So again, often I think companies, when they're submitting bids, they think, I better tell them everything there is about my business. And somewhere in and amongst all that is the information the evaluators actually need. Well, guess what? They won't basically dig for that. So make their jobs as easy as possible. Don't waste their time. Don't distract them with irrelevant information. And they will appreciate that. It'll make a difference. It makes their life easier. So let's talk about writing styles. There are 6 key rules here for writing. And this information can be used, this sort of can be used for anything you're putting down in writing. It's not just for bids. So as it says, I can't underestimate the importance of precise and clear language. So for example, don't use metaphors or figures of speech you've seen in print. So metaphors, things like it's raining cats and dogs, heart of gold, just doesn't look professional. Speak in clear English. So, someone said to me very early on in my banking days, write the way you speak. But don't use long, convoluted words which you wouldn't use if you were speaking to someone. So an example I've scribbled down here is, you might say, for example, we will show you how our proposed solution will reduce your costs by 10%. Nice and clear, measurable. But don't say, our leading edge methodology and option analysis will demonstrate increased efficiencies across your processes. It's just fluff. Too many words doesn't really make sense. I've certainly worked with people, and I've sat in meetings where they've spoken for a minute or two, and I've listened and I thought, they spoke for a couple of minutes there, but what did they actually say? It wasn't very clear. So take out long words, use short ones, keep it clear. Never use the passive, generally, where you can use the active. And I'll give you an example of that in a moment. Take words out which are unnecessary, which are superfluous. Don't use jargon. Don't use management speak, blue sky thinking, thinking out of the box. Just to keep it simple. Use everyday plain English, as it says, write as you speak. And the final thing is break any of those rules rather than say anything outright irrelevant. So in terms of the way you communicate, simple example, my son, he's an engineer with Aston Martin, no free cars, unfortunately. So if you were trying to explain something to him, you'd have to use quite technical language because he's a technical guy. But if you use that same language to try and explain things about Aston Martin's cars and engines to me, it would go straight over my head. So speak in a way that is clear for your audience. So I mentioned about an example of active versus passive writing. And like it said, generally, never use the passive when you can use the active. And here's a very simple example. So the passive is Oliver Twist was written by Charles Dickens. Active, a bit more punchy, a bit more powerful, less words. Charles Dickens wrote Oliver Twist. Bang, more impactful. But of course, like every sort of rule, if you like, there's always an exception. So here's an exception where essentially the first section in red is passive. The opera singer was heckled by an onlooker in the crowd. That's passive. The active is an onlooker in the crowd heckled the opera singer. The reason why it's okay in this case to use the passive is because the opera singer is the main focus in this sentence. So have a look at that outside, but generally, use active phraseology rather than passive when you're writing. And things to avoid. Jargon, like I said, blue sky thinking, Americanisms, hyperboles, not hyperboles, as it sort of basically says. So hyperboles are things like, you know, as it says, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. You know, I'll literally die if you don't stop using hyperboles incorrectly. So over-exaggerated statements. Don't do that. And also, don't have big capitals in your proposal or in any written communication for emphasis. It tends to distract. It looks a little bit messy. It just doesn't really work, in my opinion. So just emphasize your point in the words you're using as opposed to using capitals. And be positive in terms of your statements when you're speaking and you're writing in any proposal or bid tender. Avoid things like we would, we could, we can, we propose to. Be positive. Just say we will. It's much more powerful and it's more assertive. And the other thing we often see as an error is when referring to organizations and companies. So, for example, in this situation, we would say Branduin is running this workshop, not Branduin are running this workshop. Simple but common errors, but best to get it right. So let's do a little exercise now, or at least have a little think now about how you can write clearly, leanly, and precisely. So there's a phrase, there's a paragraph there on the right of the slide in black. Have a quick read of that. And probably haven't got the time to completely rewrite it now, but think about what words in that paragraph could be taken out to make it more punchy. I'll just give you 30 seconds to think about that. You can put something in the chat in terms of words you think are irrelevant, not necessary if you like, or just think about it for now, and then I'll go through it in literally in a moment. The whole point is to rewrite it in a way that's much more clear and uses less words. So that's the paragraph before. You can see it's, excuse me, 61 words. And the key words, the key things that need to be included are the words in red. The rest are all, you know, padding, if you like. So rewriting it, much smaller, much more punchy, much more powerful. And guess what? Virtually half the number of words. So 27 words, actually more than half the words. My mathematics wasn't too accurate there. More than half the word count as opposed to the former version. So when you're restricted in terms of word count in the proposal, then that's one way of trying to reduce word count so you can get in more relevant information to your bid as opposed to just padding it out and filling the space. So here are just some examples of the way people write, which is too wordy and long. So, I'm not going to go through them all. During the month of April, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words in April, during the time that, 4 words, while. Plenty of ways that people write, which is just too wordy and waffly, call it what you like. Just if you can write clearly and precisely, it just comes across much, much more punchy, much more positive, much more powerful. And here are a few more examples. Again, won't go through them all, but as an added bonus. Well, a bonus is something that's added on. After careful scrutiny, we'll look up the definition of scrutiny. It's looking at something carefully. We will entirely eliminate. Well, eliminate means get rid of something completely, entirely. It's mostly foreign imports. Well, you can't have an import if it's not foreign. It comes from abroad. So, there are so many things that people put and words people put into proposals, which actually don't add any value, and they just pad out what you're saying. And it just makes it more difficult for the evaluators to find the key information they need. So everything you write in your bid, everything you should write in your proposal should relate back to the objective of the tender. Okay, so that just summarizes really what I'm saying. If you can write accurately, positively, clearly, you'll connect more with the reader, with the evaluator, your bid will be appreciated more, and that is actually a potential differentiator between you and your competition. So do practice that lean, clear, accurate writing style, and it'll certainly help you in terms of your bid responses. So just to summarize essentially what we've covered, both today and in the earlier session, you've looked and complied with all the instructions. You've read the invitation to tender carefully. You've looked at the question and answered, why you? Why should they choose you over and above your competition? What helps you stand out from your competitors? What's your story? Have you looked at the bid response from the perspective of the customer? Have you demonstrated a real, thorough understanding of the client? And what's your approach? Have you explained it clearly? Have you described the value, the benefits? Is it priced in the right way? And that's a difficult one to do because it's not the cheapest way, it's the right way, the most competitive, that gives value for money, is competitive with your competitors, and that the client will pay. Have you clearly explained your approach, the steps of your approach? Is your proposal high quality, well written, professional and easy to understand, succinct but complete? Have you had document reviewed independently? That's a key thing in my view, because often when you're working on a tender, and I've worked on some fairly large ones in my banking days, you might be working on these things for 3-4 weeks, and could be a 60-70 page document, and you don't see the obvious after having looked at it so much. So get someone independent to look over your proposal before you submit it. Have you made it easy for the evaluators to score you highly by answering the questions carefully, answering all elements of the question, and giving yourself the chance to score the most points when they make those cuts? And what evidence have you provided? Have you demonstrated your uniqueness? Have you backed up what you've said independently as much as you can, whether that's, as I said, case studies, testimonials, Google reviews? If you can bring all those elements into your bid summary proposals, you're going to be well on the way to submitting a winning bid. Okay, so the final golden rule, perhaps not politically correct, but it's true. It's not the taking part, it's winning that matters. So bid to win, because it takes, and I'm being completely frank here, quite a lot of time and effort, particularly when you're writing your first bid. So pick the right ones for you, where you know you can demonstrate value, and you can meet the criteria, and do it well. So incorporate all the things I've talked about, and you'll be well on your way to a winning bid. Okay, well, I want to spend a few minutes now on some practical stuff, literally about 5 or 10 minutes. We've got a few minutes things like, as I say, where you can find tenders, who to speak to in the council. Some of you may have attended the Meet the Buyer event we had a couple of weeks ago. And in the council, certainly Hammersmith and Fulham, they are very keen to increase their local supply chains. So they want to genuinely give business to local suppliers like yourselves. But where do you start? Where do you find these opportunities? There are a number of different tender portals, but certainly for Hammersmith and Fulham, they advertise on capital resourcing. So, get yourself registered on these websites. For London boroughs generally, they generally use the London Tenders portal. And if it's a national contract, then you have the Proactis tender portal. There are probably hundreds of these portals, but these are the three key ones, certainly in Hammersmith, Fulham, London, and in the main one nationally. And you can also find information, like I said last time, on the council's website, or find a tender contract finder. The council are busy, just like you, but they're trying to make life easier for you. So at the bottom of this slide, they've appointed Michael Farquharson, who's basically the Economic Development Officer, and he's your first point of call. They've got a call centre, and they can answer all your generic questions. But if, for example, you're trying to sort of think about, who do I speak to in the council about flower arrangements, or whatever service you've got. Sometimes with councils, they're quite complex organisations in terms of they've got lots of different areas, stakeholders. It's difficult for you to navigate and find who's the right person. So Michael's a busy man because obviously he's the point of contact, but certainly do use Michael and his experience, and he'll signpost you to the right people and contacts within the council. And what they've also done is they've given you, and this information is all available, details of where they spend and their top 10 categories. So you can see from the slide there, HR is a big spend for them, IT and telephony, facilities management, and think about your own business and where it potentially could fit into those services. Breaking it down further, it gives a breakdown of their sort of capital spend, and the, again, top 5 categories where they're spending. So you can read that for yourself. But they've also given a sort of translation, a read across to the closest local business sectors that might be able to meet some of those requirements. So, as you can see, construction, real estate activities, transport, storage, water supplies. They're trying to be more open. They're trying to be more helpful. You may not find your own business broken down that much, but again, you can see here in terms of people spend, which is a big thing for them. The top categories, accommodation for older people, support for, people with independent living, homeless people and rough sleeping. And again, they've given a breakdown of what sort of local businesses, what sort of local business sectors could help support them and, meet the areas where they spend quite significant amounts. And you can see from the slide that the accommodation is a big thing. And then just finally, they've got literally categories of spend and services that they need to meet those spend areas. So again, you'll be given a copy of all these slides. We'll certainly get a link to the presentation. You can have a look and see where your own business may fit into it. But essentially, there are a whole host of activities and areas of spend where the council need support, and they're trying to get it more so from local suppliers like yourselves. Okay, well, just to sort of wrap things up, we're nearly on time, as I can see. So, like I said earlier, we had a Meet the Buyer session a couple of weeks ago, and that was essentially, we had senior people from both the council, from the private sector, just giving you the bigger picture of how they're trying to help and develop local partnerships with businesses. The programme has a number of broader webinar support. So we've got the 2 bidding webinars, which I'm running, and then we've got the designing products and services for procurement, because like I said last week, with councils particularly, you'll often be dealing with the procurement department. You won't be dealing with the end user. So the procurement department are the team who are managing the tender process on behalf of the council. We've got a specialist who will show you how to use LinkedIn most effectively to generate more business, generate more leads, more contacts. I'll also be running a specialist webinar on public sector bids and tenders, because all the things I've said today and in the webinar last week apply to public sector and local authority organisations, but they are a little bit different from the private sector. So certainly there are things that will help you if you're looking particularly to build relationships and tender with the council. And then circular economy, developing key partnerships, that's all about tackling like global challenges. You might think, well, how am I going to tackle global challenges as an individual small business? But, it's things like waste, sustainability, recycling, how to better use and manage resources. And, when you are a small business, it's sometimes difficult to do that on your own. So we'll talk to you about also developing key partnerships so you can do that on a collaborative way. And then finally, we're looking to hold a face-to-face, all things being equal, hopefully no train strikes, no snow, on the 24th of Jan, where we'll have an event where you can meet senior people from the council and from the local private sector organisations. Because at the end of the day, it is all about building relationships. And so if you've met someone and they get to know, like, and trust you, you're going to be in a slightly stronger position than someone who's never, ever even spoken to the key decision makers within the council, the key influence, the head of business. We'll have all those people there for you to meet. So, do get yourself on those webinars as much as you can. You'll find them hopefully useful and beneficial in terms of your bid writing experience and skills. And just to finish off, as I said at the outset, if you are a business registered in Hammersmith and Fulham, you are eligible for 2 fully funded one-to-one sessions with a business specialist like myself. And essentially, they're very structured sessions. It's not a bit of a chat. There'll be an action card. The first session is very much about getting to know a bit more about you, your business, your challenges, particularly around the sort of bidding and tendering side of things. And then what happens between the 2 sessions is, which are typically sort of 4 to 6 weeks apart, you'll have time to go and work on some of the committed actions that we've agreed in the first session, and then we come back in the second section and see what sort of support you might need to help you, what challenges you faced, how you're getting on. So, there's a lot of support as part of the program. So if you're not registered on the program for the one-to-one sessions, just get in touch with me. My details are all on the slides and on the next slide, and I'll be happy to add you on and get a session booked in the diary. Okay, well, we're just about on time, so that's always good. So thank you very much for your time. I did say at the start to try and commit to yourself to do something as a result of spending an hour listening to me. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes. We've got 2 or 3 minutes. If you want to put something in the chat as to what you're going to do to take your business forward, if you've got any feedback on how you thought the session was, or if you've got any questions, I'm going to stay here for a few minutes and happy to try and help. Thank you for the feedback. Thanks, Floss. Glad you found it useful. We'll get one-to-one in as well, I think, because we haven't had one yet, so we'll do that. Oh yes, very good. That's excellent. Yeah, I think Floss is saying that the other videos are all on the YouTube channel link, which is on the slides. I think 3rd or 4th slide. So they're all there basically, so you can look at those at your leisure. Okay, well, Floss, thank you for all your feedback. If anyone else has any feedback, then please do put it in the chat. And yeah, hopefully you found that useful. And like I say, if you're not registered on the program so far, then please do get yourself in touch with me, and we'll be happy to get you added to the program. The slides will be on the presentation, so you'll have a copy of the slides as part of the recording, and they'll be uploaded probably in the next 2 or 3 days. Floss, if you need anything else, just contact me off. If you need a hard copy of the slides, just contact me offline, and we can sort that out. That's not a problem as well. Oh, that's very kind. I think Lisa's put something in the chat, so that's fabulous. Thank you very much for that, Lisa. Great stuff. Okay, well, if there's nothing else from anyone, I'll just round up by saying thank you very much for your time and attendance. Hopefully you found it useful, and I'll look forward to seeing you either on future webinars, or alternatively we'll hopefully have a one-to-one session. So have a great day, and we'll speak again soon. All the very best. Bye-bye.